Thank you so much for joining us today, Gavin. It means a lot that you can help us understand more about democracy and also what your organization does. Can you give us a little background on Hawaiʻi Appleseed and how that supports our democracy?
Hawaiʻi Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice is a research and advocacy organization that works to identify and uplift policies and systems change that helps create a Hawaii where everybody can thrive. So that means that we focus on affordable housing issues, on tax and wage issues, and anti-hunger work as well, food security. And in terms of democracy, all of our work hinges on our democracy here in Hawaii. So working a lot at the legislature, sometimes working in the courts to rectify injustices, like one example, ensuring the preservation of affordable housing projects where there's been a promise made to maintain the affordability of a housing development that was built with government funds. And then that promise has been broken, trying to get out from under those affordability restrictions early. Typically, our work impacts hundreds or thousands of people on the issues that we take up.
It's kind of exciting, though, isn't it? In a way. I mean, it's heartbreaking. And at the same time, you know you're making an impact.
There are so many wonderful social service provider organizations out there that are helping people with their day-to-day, like individual needs. That is so critical. But if we don't address the broader systemic issues, then we have real problems. The real problems that we're actually facing in terms of housing affordability, in terms of really close to half our population not being able to afford to meet their basic needs. That's the kind of stuff that we're trying to address. Ideally, we'd be putting those social service providers out of a job because we'd create an economy and government where everybody can thrive.
Well, looking at the news and everything that's happening internationally, nationally, locally, some of us, our hearts are breaking because the confidence that we had in people and in systems seems to be shaky right now. How can you help us bring back, this sense that we are safe in a representative democracy?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really getting back to the basics, the ideals of our country's constitution, a government by the people and for the people. Those are ideals that we've never really met. And in some ways, it makes sense. The ideals come, like the concepts come, the language comes before the action evolves. So we've had over 200 years since the United States adopted the Constitution, and we've gotten better. So we no longer have those categorical exclusions on voting, though we still have problems there, obviously. We no longer have chattel slavery, but we still have people working 40 hours a week and unable to afford food and shelter. We need to do better. And we can. We absolutely can.
Okay, so help us with the can. What can we do?
Well, I think it's really to the extent that you're able to get involved in government and influence policy, like do it. But I think really our government systems and structure needs to change to allow people to engage. So all the decisions that we're making now are not made by the people who are suffering the adverse consequences of those decisions. One example is, there's a governor's housing stakeholders work group. We're fortunate to be a part of that work group. And there are a bunch of developers and like heads of government agencies that are part of that work group. There's not a single person on that work group that's struggled with housing insecurity, that's struggled with houselessness. It's called a housing stakeholder work group, but it is missing so many important stakeholders. I'm really inspired by the example of someone named James Koshiba, a good friend. He was tapped to lead the housing subcommittee of the House Select Committee on COVID that was created in response to the pandemic. he brought together this wonderful, diverse group of perspectives that included nonprofit and business CEOs. It included the government agency folks, like the usual suspects there, but it also included people who had experienced housing insecurity and houselessness. And by bringing those people together and creating an environment where everybody's voices were heard, they were able to craft this really great and effective rental assistance, like pandemic rental assistance program that worked way better than if you hadn't had those voices at the table that were saying, oh, I've experienced trying to get those that assistance before, and this was my experience, and we need to avoid that. That's what we need to do, and that is so rare in our government today.
It's so rare in our government. However, it is Hawaii. We come together.
It is Hawaii. It is aloha. It is like caring about everybody and ensuring, I mean, there's no way that Hawaii would have treated people the way we're treating them now. And
Right.
we just need to get back to those roots and instill that ethic into how we operate our government and how we structure our policies.
Well, and as we wrap up our conversation for today, you know, what you're saying is not only instill it in the government system, but in our families, in our communities, and remind ourselves about who we are.
Exactly. You know, Gandhi's quote, "Be the change that you want to see," is not just about getting out there and advocating. It's about, like, if you're a business owner, like, pay people a living wage, treat people well, and get out there and speak up for people when you see that needs to happen.
That's a wonderful message as we leave our conversation today. And I want to thank you so much for the work you're doing and for bringing people together and for holding the bigger vision of what's possible.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate the conversation.
You've just had the opportunity to meet Gavin Thornton, Executive Director of the Hawaiʻi Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice.